Hey YouTube, I'm Andrew Roder with Gunslinger Tactics, and today I'm going to talk about dry fire training. Now, today specifically, I'm going to talk about dry fire training for law enforcement and the necessity for it. The civilian aspect of it, I will talk about later, and I'm going to have more videos to come on just dry fire training in general, not just law enforcement specific. But a lot of this will apply. But what I'm about to talk about is some issues I see in law enforcement with dry fire training is really what this comes down to. Some of the issues I see is that cops, when they get hired, they do their skills. And for those of you who don't know, in Minnesota, skills is essentially your police academy. So they go to their police academy in school, they finish that, they get their week-long firearms training, which is a lot of that's legacy training, and that'll be another topic to talk about is legacy training in law enforcement and a lot of issues we see with it, especially getting cops to come out of that, and then we have to break the habits they just learned to actually make them effective to get better at training and a better shooter. So they get their gun, they start shooting, and we give them their initial firearms, whether it's an agency that can afford multiple days, one day, a week. I don't know. It kind of depends on budgetary stuff and how much the agency itself can spend on that is a big portion of this as well. I do think some of this falls on officers, though, to understand and know. Like, one thing I stress is, hey, you guys need to be spending 5 to 10 minutes a day, if feasible, or at least a few times a week, dry fire training. It doesn't take long to build an index, but you need to build an index. Since we've gone to red dots in law enforcement, the trend that we've seen is that there still is a number of people who don't do any dry fire. So they come to the range, they do their once, a qual a year, and then they do their firearms training once a year, where it's department wide, or maybe it's twice a year, depending on your agency, or maybe it's a few times a year. I don't know, but what I've seen is that when you do that, a lot of them choose not to do any dry fire training, which I guess is fine, but it's also not fine because you need to be able to have the gun when it comes out being a consistent index every single time. And I think that's the biggest thing I see is, cops will shoot, they'll do their thing, they'll come up to the line, they'll pull their gun out, and the first thing they do is this to try to find the dot, or it's this with their head to try to find the dot, which obviously is not what we want, because on the street, what do you think they're going to do when we add stress? Well, I can tell you, because you add minimal amount of stress to a lot of them, and then what do? They just start pulling the trigger as soon as the gun comes out, and they point shoot at 7 yards, which in my opinion is a terrible way. We should not be engaging by point shooting, nor should that be the way to be like, hey, it doesn't matter if you can't find your dot, just start sending the rounds because it's life or death. It's like, well, yeah, but we also need to be training to get an index, because that would just solve that issue of having to go, well, now you're going to have to point shoot, which is not an effective aiming scheme. It brought me back to when I had explained that to someone else, is it brought me back to the old, hey, if you're running like a bunker, one hand, and you can't get on your sights, but you can see the flashlight on your gun. If you're carrying a bunker and you're off to the side and you've got your flashlight on, you're good up to 5-7 yards. Which, sure, I guess it is better than just going point shooting, because at least you're using an aiming reference, which would be the hot spot of the light. So I like that better than just point shooting. That's not ideal either, because it's not an actual sight picture, but it's something, and it's if you're running like a Surefire Turbo, so it's got the very tight beam, that I can understand more, but you actually have to practice that if you're going to practice. And if you're going to use that as an aiming scheme, like maybe you are the bunker guy at your police department or on your SWAT team or whatever, and that's your job. Okay, then sure, like that makes more sense. But to go, yeah, point shooting is just what, I'm going to resort to under stress. So I'm just going to, it doesn't really matter. I can just point shoot. Well, we've seen the hits on target. I've seen them at 7 yards. With that, I love doing a bill drill to kind of show that, because you're 7 yards away. And when you ask cops to go really fast with level 3 holster, generally what you see is it takes them a long time to get out of the holster because they're nervous and they're scared. And so they miss both retention devices. And then the gun comes out, and then they're either fishing for it, or they just send the rounds and call it okay. And then it looks like a cheese grater, or the rounds which don't even hit the target because they're doing all these things wrong. And So the point I want to get across here in this video is like cops have to be doing dry fire training. I mean, you have to be. There's not just this easy sauce of like, hey, I'm just going to show up and the gun will just be there every single time. Like that is just not the way it works. And you actually have to do some training. It doesn't take long to build an index. I mean, if you work on it for several days, for a few weeks, a few days, a week, for several weeks, you can build an index pretty quick. And then uh, just practice every so often to make sure, like, yep, gun comes out, the dot's there. They make all these dots that have, a circle, like primary arms, right? They have a optic that has a big circle. So if you're off, it shows you by having that. That's great, and it's like training wheels, but you don't ride a bike with training wheels forever. Like at some point, you learn how to ride a bike. The training wheels are great, but it's not how you should be. You shouldn't be depending on that. And I've ran the Hollow Sun that has those that the really big outer circle to help, and that was great when I first started shooting. But then after just a few weeks, I built an index, and then I didn't want to run that anymore. It didn't make sense for me to necessarily run it, and then I ended up changing dots and doing a bunch of other stuff. But the point I'm trying to make once again is that you have to do dry fire training. And it can be as simple as just taking your gun, downloading it either at work or at home, depending on, if your work allows you to do that, if you have space to do it, all these sorts of things. Obviously there's a safety concern, but we're adults. And if you're a cop who carries a gun every day, like, yes, you have to understand, like, yeah, I'm going to download my gun to do some dry fire training. Okay. There's risk with it, sure, but like that's your job, is to carry that, and you also need to be proficient enough with it that it comes out of the holster and you have a good index. Now there's a lot of other stuff with shooting that also needs to go right. Obviously, like we need to have we need to be able to, when we pull the trigger, not move the sights, pull the trigger in a way that doesn't move the sights. It's that simple. Like, how you grip it and all that sort of stuff is is its own topic, but you need to also be able to pull the trigger and not influence the sights in any way. That is a big part of this as well. But as far as like getting the dot, the thing that should be easy is just, hey, it comes out of the holster, it's there. And that's free. It costs you absolutely no money to do that and build one. And that is hard to see in law enforcement when you have cops who just choose not to do it um, because they don't want to. They don't care. They're like, whatever, it's not a big deal. It kind of is, because it's not only could be your life, it could be your partner's lives, and it could be the civilian, the public's life that you swore that you would protect. So, it's one of those things. I'm not saying you have to be a gun nut. Once again, you just have to care a little bit and try. You do have to put some effort. In time, if you just didn't do it and for 20 years you practice, I'm sure you'd build it just eventually. I mean, I guess I don't know. But you have to do some sort of training to build that in. Now, whether that's simply just coming out of the holster and getting that index, boom, come out of the holster. Okay, how do I adjust it? Well, that's a great question. How would you adjust that? The way I tell people is, comes out of the holster, I don't want to see major corrections. Okay. I want to see minor corrections and to fix that dot and where it needs to be. This gun doesn't have a dot on it right now. This is just one of my Glock 47s without one. But, what I tell people is, when the gun comes out, right, and they're like, hey, the dot. So if I come up to here and the dot is, let's say it's low like that. Hey, okay. Looking through the optic, do you see the muzzle, right? Like, this is just to build an index. It's not, I'm telling you every time the gun comes out, you should be doing this. This is to help build an index for some references I give. Is, hey, the gun comes out. If the barrel is down, like, you look through the optic and you're like, wow, where's that front sight post? Because most law enforcement agencies are keeping front and rear iron sights. And if they're not, well, then fine. Okay, when you look through this, is the top of the optic, like, is it flat? Is it angled down? Like, use some indicators of the gun. Like, okay, if I look to the side of the gun, oh, the gun is actually angled down. Okay, great. Let's just lift the barrel up ever so slowly. Oh, there's the dot. Okay, so now you've found it. That's what I want you to focus on. Like, hey, draw again, see where it is. Okay, oh, it came out. Oh, it's down low. Okay, so you're consistently, when it comes out, drawing it low or high, whatever the case is. You need to start understanding that. And the big part of that is actually self-diagnosing your issues. Part of that adult learning is, hey, what are you doing wrong? You need to self-recognize. I can give you the tools, but you actually have to put some effort in yourself. And I think, you know, a lot of people, this isn't just specific to law enforcement training or anything, but just a lot of people in life want the answer to be given to them instead of having to try to find it. And we need to be comfortable with trying to find the answer ourselves and diagnose what I'm doing wrong. Like, what am I doing wrong? Okay, I'm consistently drawing and it's coming low. Cool. Let's even take the holster portion out of it. Let's not even draw from the holster now. And I just want you to just, from back here, come out. Okay, yep. Still low. Okay, yep. Okay, now it's on. Now it's on. Cool. You've built that. Now let's add the holster draw back in there, because I'm just trying to get you proficient with an index. So when it comes out, oh, it was just slightly low, and now I just need to come up just a little bit. Cool. Oh, now I'm right on that one. Or it's at the top of the window. And now I'm building to where it's, okay, now it's in the center of the window, 8 to 10 draws right off, right out the gate. Awesome. That's great. And I think that takes away a lot of the problems where finding the dot. Okay, because when you're frustrated on the range, and you can tell, like, when you have shooters who are frustrated with, they can't even find the dot, and then they just start pulling the trigger because they're frustrated, because they hear other people shooting and they're like, well, now I got to start shooting because I got to catch up. You know, that makes it tougher. So building an index and finding that, I think, is key for law enforcement training. It's key in civilian and the competitive shooting realm as well. It is, especially for people who are protecting themselves, and if they're going to carry a gun, carry a concealed weapon and do that, it's huge. But like I said, this is kind of a law enforcement specific thing that I'm addressing in this video, and I will make other videos about dry fire training and all that sort of stuff. But um, that is something I wanted to talk about and address, because it's something we see, and it's a common problem, and it needs to be addressed by officers. And knowing, like, hey, I do take some accountability for this. I do have to train on my own time. So that's what I want to talk about. Add your comments down below if you have any questions. And once again, I will add videos of how to dry fire specifically. There's a lot of really good books out there. The Ben Stoeger book is good. I've seen some of it. I haven't bought the book, but I've seen some ones that they had. Got a lot of great dry fire drills. But I will touch on some of the dry fire drills that I do, or how I do it, or some simple things you can do. So thanks for watching.